Hey y'all, it's Sheeta from Sheeta's on the Loose, and I'm here today with part 2 of my Antarctica videos. In this video today, we're going to talk about the logistics, everything that happened from the time I put down a down payment, and maybe a little bit before that about how I chose the company I went with, to the cost, because that was the #1 question, and all the other things I needed to know along the way, and that you'll need to know too if you're going to Antarctica. I posted another video, part 1, with some of the basics about the trip. And I included in that how I chose the tour company I went with. I went with Up in the Air Life Travel, and it was because I've been on their trips before. I know what they're like, I know what to expect, and I wanted that experience. Up in the Air Life contracted with Abercrombie and Kent. So they were actually the hosts, you could say, on the trip. Most of their staff was running everything. They had all of the adventure staff there, but the boat was owned by a company named Ponant, and so the actual cruise ship part was run by a third company. Ponant is a French company, so we happen to have a lot of French food and other things on the trip. And I'm going to get more into the food for a minute, but let's go back to the beginning about costs. We're here. I paid Up in the Air Life about $15,000 for this experience. So that covered the flight from Buenos Aires to Ushuaia and everything on the boat from Ushuaia to Antarctica, Antarctica back, and then the flight back to Ushuaia, to Buenos Aires from Ushuaia. So the good things to know about what comes in that price are, the experience was made really simple for us. The cruise operators, Abercrombie and Kent, provided all of the external, the outerwear gear that we would need. So the ponchos, which we got to keep, the pants so that our legs didn't get wet, they're waterproof pants, and the boots, which they kept, but what am I gonna do with snow boots or these rain big boot thick? I got nothing. I don't need those. So I didn't mind that. We brought our own gloves, our own like under layers. So I did spend money on gloves and hats and underwear layers, but the temperature in Antarctica was on average in the low to mid 30s. If you live in a cold area, you probably have everything you need already for this journey. You've got scarves, you've got gloves, you've got, multiple layers. Living in Mexico City, I don't need those things, so I don't have them. My base layers are now my pajamas some nights in the winter because it gets reasonably cool here, but not cold. There were a lot of days, because a lot of people care about the actual temperature. There are a lot of days where I didn't need gloves or a hat. My hands are always cold, so I don't notice cold that much in my hands. But yeah, there were days on adventures where the gloves got in the way of like taking photos of penguins. So I would take the gloves off and I wasn't cold. I didn't really wear a hat. I don't wear hats often. But back to the cost. Okay, so $15,000 is on the high end of what it costs to go to Antarctica. So don't get distracted by that number. It's possible to do it for a lot less. The low end of these trips is about $5,000 and about 8,000 plus is average. So 15,000 is definitely the high end of that. It was a luxury experience, and Up in the Air Life provides luxury travel. So I knew this going into it. All the food and drink were included on the ship. So we didn't have to pay for anything. Once we got on the boat, everything was included. That included food any time of the day, room service any time of the day. And I had a lot of room service because I told you in the last video, there were days where I just couldn't leave bed. And so, yeah, I definitely got a lot of room service there. All of the staff, all of the tips were included. Everything was included once we got on the boat, except for testing, but testing was included when we were on the boat. I think we had to pay for testing when we were in Buenos Aires, and that was separate. That's what my memory tells me. But we did COVID tests quite a few times, and those were included on the boat because they want to make sure that we're all safe there together. Some people who are looking for a true budget experience fly down to Ushuaia on their own, and they go to, I guess there are offices down there that are run by cruise ship operators, and they stay maybe a couple of days or a couple of weeks down there looking to go on a ship that might have a couple of extra spots and get down there on the cheap. I'm doing that. If you guys have watched my channel, you know I'm more of a luxury traveler than a budget traveler. So for me, it was worth the extra price to not have to drag all of that gear with me, and to not be down there looking for things. There are, like I said, middle of the road packages you can go on that sound like they're nice. You know, you can, like I said, the ones for $8,000, the ones for $5,000. I am sure they're really nice. I was intentional about going with Up in the Air Life because I know what services they provide. And I know that their clientele is typically very Black. And the reason this was important for me for this journey was that I was going to spend 14 days with these people, if you include the time in Buenos Aires. And I didn't want to be one of the only Black people on a ship in the middle of the ocean with hundreds of people that look nothing like me. And besides our group, our Up in the Air Life group, there were 3 Black women who were traveling with the hundreds of people. One of the Black women kind of joined our group. She was with us all the time. And so for a while I forgot, but she wasn't in our group. And the other 2 were a mother and daughter pair. But if I had gone, even if it was just me and my mom, we would have been like them. If we weren't on the same ship with them, we would have been like them, where it would have just been us and nobody who looked like us anywhere around. And I don't intentionally put myself in situations where I'm going to be the minority, because it can be very uncomfortable and very unpleasant, to be perfectly honest. And so knowing that I was going to end up going with a group of Black women was exciting to me. And I made a bunch of new friends, and there were a lot of women that I really love. And one of the best things about the experience for me was meeting these other travelers, these other Up in the Air Life travelers. They were exciting, they were kind, they were generous, they were accomplished, they were beautiful. It was a really awesome experience to be in Antarctica with 30 plus Black women and a couple of men sprinkled in there, and to have that sisterhood and those bonds, and the bonds that are still happening today in our group, in our group messaging. So that was one of the reasons I chose Up in the Air Life. Getting back to cost, I mentioned before that the Drake Passage was kind of terrible. There is a way to avoid that terribleness and cut the 2 days travel time down. So what some people do is they fly down on a flight to, I think it's St. John's Island down there in Antarctica, and then they board a cruise ship down there. I know that Quark Expeditions does that. I think their base price for the Antarctica expedition, if you're doing the Drake Passage, if you're cruising through from Ushuaia down, is under $7,000. But if you want to take the 2-hour flight from, I think they live in Ushuaia, to St. John's Passage, you have to add an extra $5,000 for that round trip flight. So you can go to Antarctica and avoid that crazy water in the Drake Passage, but it's going to cost you thousands extra than it would otherwise. I'm not, in the nature of being fully transparent, I could have done a Quark Passage expedition and flew down for less than it cost for Abercrombie in Kent. But like I said, I really enjoyed my experience and I have no regrets about choosing to go with them. It's time to talk about one of the things I didn't love about the experience, and that was the food. The food was bland at best. It wasn't that great of an experience. It wasn't, there were specific things on the menu I could pick out and they were good enough every time. Like, I get a hamburger from room service and it was good enough. Now, every time I ordered the same burger from the menu, it would come a different way every time, no matter, like, I could just say, send me the hamburger, right? And one time it would come with cheese, another time maybe cheese and bacon, third time, nothing on it. It just depended on who was in the kitchen that day. Same thing for breakfast. I ordered the same breakfast 3 days in a row, and it was completely different every time. So there wasn't like a consistency. And when you went to the restaurants, it was like, meh. So it is all inclusive, but the food was not something to write home about. It was not so terrible that it was inedible. Like, no one said that. But overall, meh. I think people had the same reaction to the wine. I am not a big wine drinker, so meh, and I wasn't really drinking that much on the boat to begin with. Meh, you know. All right, what do I wish I knew ahead of time? I have never been as dehydrated as I was on that boat in my entire life. It was crazy. I was drinking water. Our the guy who was in charge of our cabin, who cleaned it every day, I kept asking for water, I guess, and eventually he was like, how about I just bring you a case? Thank you. And then, like, 3 days later, another case showed up, and I'm drinking, but it's so dry down there. It was really, really hard to stay hydrated. Like, and I have an autoimmune issue that that gets irritated if I'm dehydrated. And so within like 2 days of being on the boat, my eye was patched up and I was walking around like a pirate, because my autoimmune issue kicked in. They had a doctor on board, and I went to see her, and she helped a lot. But yeah, the dehydration was something fierce. The dryness of the hands, your lips, the ashiness, the collective Black ashiness was a problem. But you slathered, you layered, you lathered, and you did your best. But yes, I had no idea that level of dehydration existed anywhere on the planet, but it does in Antarctica, because it was insane. We were always like, look at our hair, like, what's happening here? It was just dryness. Like I said, my eye acted up. It was pretty bad. So that was one thing I wasn't prepared for, but everything else, I mean, you got on a boat, we got on a plane, we got on a boat, we toured around on a boat, we took little Zodiacs out to islands and to the mainland, the continent, and traveled around, saw animals. The actual physical part of this is not that trying. There were a number of people out there with canes. One thing about the overall demographic of the adventure is that it skews older. So outside of our Up in the Air Life group, there were mostly older people. There were a couple of families with younger kids, but it was mostly older people. And they were out there with their canes walking. When we went onto land where there were struggles, they gave us, what are struggles, where it might have been rocky or like we had to climb a little hill, they gave us walking sticks. And so I used walking sticks most of the time just to make sure I didn't land on my butt. And I think I landed on my butt at least once, I think. Because like, you're in the snow, it's what's gonna happen. So yeah, so if you're afraid that you're not in shape enough for this adventure, you don't really need to be in shape for this adventure. While we were out with on the land, anytime you wanted to go home, go home. They always had boats going back and forth. So one day my mom was out there and she was really uncomfortable because it was too windy and too cold for her Jamaican behind. And so she was like, I'm gonna go home. So she just left. Like I said, great experience, would do it again. The dehydration was truly my biggest concern because it kicked off a medical issue for me. The price, there are a variety of price options you can use to do this adventure. I really enjoyed it. So that is part 2. Part 3 is going to have a little bit more details, other details that I know you guys want to know. So stay tuned for part 3. Watch part 1 if you haven't already, and I will talk to you soon. Bye.